Here we are, at an elevation of more than 6,000 feet above sea level, surrounded by snow-capped mountains and little ski towns, Utah. Here to visit High West Distillery for a very special whiskey release. But something's different this time. Ryan isn't here. Our normal brothers trip into Whiskeyland has been altered. So what do? Well, let's back up. As I landed in Salt Lake City for my cross-country flight, I eagerly searched for my special guest. I didn't want to do this alone after all. And at the baggage claim, I found him.
What's up, dude? Look at us. Oh. How you doing, dude?
Good, man.
You grow a few inches?
This is Andrew. We met about 10 years ago on a film set. He was the sound guy. We've worked together a lot on and off over the years, and recently he moved to Colorado from New York City. He's one of those friends that no matter how long you've been apart, it's like no time has passed at all. He's a skilled sound man and also a great friend. He's kind, funny, and an absolute riot. Andrew will be coming along the journey into Whiskeyland to learn and experience everything we can about High West. Our first stop on this trip is up the mountain to the distillery. You take this winding road up, and as you get closer to the top, the views get better and better. This is, without a doubt, one of the most beautiful distillery locations I've ever seen. Once at the top, the road dips back down into a gorgeous distillery nestled into the mountain. There we met Tara Lindley, who is a ball of joy and laughter. But once the laughter settled, we discovered how passionate and knowledgeable she is about whiskey.
What I really love is introducing people to whiskey and talking to them about it and teaching them about what we do and how we do what we do. I love having that interaction with people so that they have that aha moment and they can learn to appreciate it as well. Sometimes people might be intimidated by it. Oh, it's too strong, it's too high alcohol. But helping educate people about whiskey just feels so good to me. And when I come back from these market trips that I go on where I do staff trainings at different restaurants or host dinners with whiskey tastings and pairings, that always feels so good to make that connection with people so that they can also love what we do. You know what's cool about all three of these unicorns? All three of them have High West Rye in them. Hell yeah.
We'll get to those whiskeys in a second, but first I wanted to hear about how Tara got into the whiskey industry.
Prior to working in the whiskey industry, I was in the wine industry. And so I was very focused on wine, and that was a large part of my life at that time. But I was ready to kind of explore something else. And when I got the offer for the interview here at High West, that's when I actually sipped whiskey for the first time. I'd shot whiskey plenty of times, but I started learning to appreciate whiskey at that point in time. That was 2016.
With a career in whiskey, and specifically in sensory, I was curious if there were any parallels from when she was a kid to what Tara is doing today.
So I think it came from when I was about 6 years old. I used to go into my mom's kitchen and I would make perfume blends of all the different ingredients in the kitchen, and I would name them after the Great Lakes. And I would, my Lake Erie blend was apple cider vinegar, flour, vanilla, and butterscotch chips. And it was my favorite one. I would make sure that she wore it all the time. So I think that's where it started. But in the wine industry, my role was much more focused toward analytical chemistry and lab analyses. So there was sensory involved in all those aspects along the way. And what was really interesting is that when I interviewed here, the master distiller, Brendan Coyle, he had a background in spirits, and he was interested in bringing in a little bit of diversity, me from the wine background. And then a little over a year later, he hired Isaac Winter, our director of distilling, who has a beer background. So with the three of us leading, everything from spirits production and blending, we had this really interesting and diverse background to come with different perspectives and how we put blends together and how we evaluate them.
Oh yeah, walk us through these 3 unicorn bottles, which thank you for sharing with us. It's super cool.
Yeah. I'm kind of new. What is a unicorn? Why are we calling them unicorn bottles?
Because these are very special, highly sought after, low production volume bottles that at least one of them you probably can't find anymore. One of them is probably pretty rare. And then the last one that we're going to taste has not yet been released.
Cool.
This is kind of a rendition of the Midwinter Night's Dram, but it's called the Encore. So this was released at the same time that we released the Midwinter Night's Dram Act 10. And rewind a year earlier, our master distiller, Brendan Coyle, and I were sitting at the Act 9 release dinner, and we're talking about what are we going to do to make the Act 10 release so special. Midwinter Night's Dram typically has a blend of our rye, a blend of MGP and High West rye finished in port barrels, ruby and tawny port barrels. So I said, well, let's bring in white port barrels. We'll have this trifecta of all the different kinds of port barrels for the Act 10 release. And so we sourced all the port barrels, the ruby, the tawny, and the white. And we, put the spirit down in there, and we let it set and we let it age. And over time, when we went to start sampling these different lots, we noticed how beautiful the white port finish portion was. And when we blended it with the ruby and tawny finish portions, it just got lost in there. And so it was this.
I see what happened. Okay.
It was this last minute decision to pull out the white port finish portion and create an entirely separate product.
Oh, wow.
And we called it the Encore. It's the only time that we've ever done this. And
The nose is incredible.
Yeah.
Yes.
Super soft.
What I get on that nose, there's a really beautiful golden raisin note, and that does carry through on the palate for me as well.
That's what it is. I'm like, what is that like fruit note? That
Yeah, it's definitely thinking raisins.
Yeah.
I think a lot of things taste like raisins. It's not good. It's my go-to.
Raisins.
Raisins. Old grapes.
Can't go wrong if it was one of those.
Wine.
So when we're developing and working on any of our High West products, really we're looking for very bold, assertive, unique flavor profiles. And, starting off with, our double rye, for example, that is an incredibly spicy, in-your-face rye. It stands up in any cocktail. The bourbon as well, that has a lot more punch to it than just some sweet bourbon. We have some high rye mash bills in there that give it a lot more recognition. I think that, as we develop these blends, we try to make them unique and stand out, and something that, yes, it's sippable, but it's also important it stands up in a cocktail. And it's something that you can't find elsewhere. I mean, it's important for us to create the best products and
Involuntary. So good.
and do something special. I personally love our white port finishes, or our white wine finishes, I should say, because the white wines bring out these really beautiful nuances that you don't see in red wines, and those are beautiful too. But these really beautiful like stone fruit notes and like floral notes, and sometimes a little bit of a grassy character, which really brightens up and brings that top note. I love developing new blends or our seasonal blends from year to year. It's really exciting for me to, when it's time to develop a new blend, to go into the inventory, see what we can use, and look at everything individually. And so we start it at kind of as a breakout to say, these are all the eligible whiskeys. Here's the sensory profile on all of them and where they are now. And, I might have looked at them a year earlier when I was doing, Midwinters the year before. But now I'm looking at them again in a different light with a little more age on them, or, some different lots, different months, and, getting to see how things change over time. So I love taking all the individual parts and figuring out how to make them all work in harmony together. We're gonna try the Prisoner's Share next.
This deal.
Is a blend of bourbon and rye. All three of these contain High West rye, which is super exciting for all of these releases. And then we took that whiskey blend and we finished it in Prisoner wine barrels. So the Prisoner Wine Company is one of our finest wineries within the Constellation wine portfolio, and they make these beautiful red wine. And we took those wine barrels that they were aging the wine in, and we finished our whiskey in it. What I love about this whiskey is that it brings forward really beautiful maturation characters. The whiskey in here ranges anywhere from 4 to 15-year-old.
Okay.
So we've got some really great range of age on there, which is blended in just to give you, a little bit of those higher maturation qualities without it being, 100% old whiskey.
Yeah.
But we like the attributes of some of the younger whiskey too. So bringing all that together really enhances the complexity. I get a lot of mahogany.
Yes.
And cherry.
Yeah,
the
cherry.
cherry character coming through.
Yeah, like ruby. It's a color, but that's coming up line,
Whatever works for you.
Like shiny red,
I describe sensory in terms of color and shapes also.
Oh,
whatever works.
What color and shape is this to you?
I'm gonna go with like a cherry mahogany type color.
Yeah.
Shape is going to be cylindrical. Sensory is unique for every single person. And, what I and my team smell in, this glass of Midwinter Night's Dram is going to be different from what you or anyone else smells, because we all have at least 1,000 genes that code for the way that we smell, the way we taste, the way we perceive sensory. Teaching people that there's no right answer is really kind of, the fun part of it, because we're all different. We're all going to experience it different. There doesn't have to be this stuffiness to say that this is what this is. It can be what they want it to be.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's decadent, it's rich.
Yeah.
That red wine finish gives you a lot of those deeper, darker, dried fruit notes.
Yeah.
The blend of bourbon and rye, for me, I experienced the bourbon up front as more of that, like corn sweetness and a little bit of that like smoother weight on the tongue, but then it evolves into this beautiful rye spice to the finish.
Yeah.
And I love that about bourbon and rye blends.
The next day, we met Steve Walton, the director of hospitality for High West.
So basically, growing up back in England, I started bartending, working in my local pub. So my parents used to basically drink there, and as you become of age, I started just collecting glasses when I wasn't old enough, and then as soon as I turned 18, I started like pulling pints, kind of making gin and tonics. So I've been in the business, for a pretty long time, and then I came over here to be a ski bum for I'm going to say for one winter, but it's been 18 years now. I came in just for a drink one day, and I was literally sitting at the bar watching what they do and seeing the products and drinking the cocktails. I was like, I gotta get me a job here. And then I've been lucky enough over the years. I was a bartender to lead bartender to beverage director to now director of hospitality. We took over the bar program. We made some big changes. We took the Coke gun out and started moving to Mexican Coke and Sprite. We started using fresh juices, and we kind of turned the bar program around. And then, 2 years into it, we were lucky enough to be nominated for Outstanding Bar Program for James Beard.
Steve has had a huge impact on the bar program at High West. He made it sound simple, but especially in Utah, it's no easy feat.
So Utah has some really interesting laws when it comes to cocktail creation. So the bar team here have to be super creative in order to come up with different cocktails. So cocktails can't exceed 2.5 ounces. You can't have more than 1.5 ounces of a base spirit, and then the other ounce can be flavoring. So the best example that we could use is our old fashioned. Right? So we use 1.5 ounces of double rye, and then our flavoring is 1 ounce of bourbon. In the eyes of the laws or the requirements of Utah, is they still live under the whiskey umbrella, but one is classified as a bourbon, the other one is classified as a rye whiskey, so we can blend them to create our own product, to create the old fashioned.
So Andrew and I had to try the old fashioned, and we loved it. It's got the right amount of sweetness, and it sips easy. The perfect, well-balanced cocktail. Hospitality is a hard job. You have to care for people, provide experiences, and always be thinking ahead. I wondered what hospitality meant to Steve.
Growing up in your local pub back at home in England, like that's where everyone is, right? That's if you look at Cheers, right, is a great example of that local. You walk in and say, "Hey Norm," and it's having that local. When I used to bartend back at home in literally an old little fishing village, and there's fishermen coming in after a day's work or anything like that, that CJ is going to be drinking cider out of a Stella glass, right? You know what these people are drinking. And he was called CJ because he was called Cider John, right? It's crazy. But the people, what they're doing. You see Derek walking down the hill and he's on his way, and he's going to be drinking his pint of Carling, so it's poured and ready on the bar when you show up. Like, that's hospitality, getting to know your people. And it's just bringing people together over good times, and we bring people together over great whiskey. The togetherness, the people that we have here is kind of like my Whiskeyland. Like we can go Route 1 and sit around a campfire while I'm camping with family and friends, which is awesome. But for me, it's the people that we have here that gives everybody that comes through this door the experience that they're looking for, and it's so awesome. But yeah, it all goes back to the people.
The next morning, Andrew and I decided to hit the slopes. After all, when in Utah, do as the Utahns do.
We're here to shred.
First life, baby. We're gonna go flip. We heard Utah's got the best pow in the state, in the country.
We're about to ride it.
About to
Shred
ride
it.
Pow,
Let's
pow.
go.
Super stoked.
Yeah, that's good.
Wild times.
After our time on the slopes, we met up with Isaac Winter, the director of distilling.
I graduated from the University of Utah with a degree in chemistry and quickly realized that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in a lab. And so I took a job at Red Rock Brewing Company in Salt Lake after classes, working on the packaging line, putting labels on bottles one by one. And through that experience, fell in love with fermentation and the marriage of science and art of creating flavor and managing this biological process, and totally fell in love, and we were off to the races. When I was in 7th grade, I took an extracurricular cooking class, and it was taught by my friend's dad. He's like super animated, really charismatic, and just made cooking fun and accessible for me, like 12 years old at the time. It was from that class that I really got some confidence in the kitchen and exploring flavors, and my parents were both really, really supportive of me making dinner for them instead of them having to come home and make dinner for us, right? But then at the same time, I was always good at math and science, and so I had sort of these two parallel pieces of my life running side by side. And then once I realized that you could add hops to beer to make this type of tropical fruit flavor, but you needed to look at the cell count and the biomass production to make sure your alcohol level is going to be all right, or these are the oxidation reactions that you see during whiskey maturation. It was that where everything kind of came together, and it's just been the time of my life in the last decade or so.
Andrew and I then joined a High West Distillery tour with some of the folks from the Casa Noble team. Our guide Austin was great. During our tour, I noticed their still. Apparently, its name is Agnes.
Agnes is our still that we have here. She's a 6,000 liter handmade four-size copper pot still. We've got a very traditional neck and line arm setup, but it goes into a 4-plate column with a defumator on top. So we have a lot of control over the proof, the character, and the quality of the distillate that comes off. In traditional Scotch whiskey fashion, you would normally do a double distillation. You put your beer into the still, you strip out all the alcohol, you maybe mingle a couple of those together, and you do that last distillation to kind of purify the spirit. But in, we'll say, true American whiskey fashion, we're doing it single pass. So we put our beer into Agnes's pot, and we can get up to 160 proof in one pass. So it's time efficient, it's energy efficient, and it makes the kind of whiskey that we like to put our name on. Our philosophy is really consistent whiskey going into the barrel is going to make it easier on the back end to create really consistent blends. But at the end of the day, it's a biological process, and the barrels are living, breathing things. You're working with yeast that has a mind of its own sometimes. And then each one of these barrels tells a little bit different story. The wood comes from a different side of, part of the tree. They're all stacked 5 high, so they see a little bit different area of the warehouse for their lifetime. And so you have to then bring in the art of blending at the end, whether you're bringing in column still whiskey from another distiller or not, whether you're just making your own things. You have to look at all the lots and the character of the inventory that you have to work with and blend those together into something that's beautiful that you can put your name on it. And then at the end, you can only agonize so much. You get to a certain point and then you just have to kind of kiss it goodbye and put it out into the world. I mean, there's something really special about making whiskey at whatever we are, 7,500 feet above sea level in the mountains. You know, it's damn hard to get whiskey, you know, made here and then shipped out, but it makes it that much more of a labor of love, I think. We'll come and you know, it'll be negative 10 degrees when we get here at the distillery, and we'll have fought back the 30 head of elk that were on the road leading up to the distillery. But, you know, coming in here and, you know, starting the still up when it's quiet, you're the only one here. There's something special about that.
Back at our sensory tasting with Tara, we gotta try the whiskey we were all here for.
Okay, I am most excited about this one. This is our Noble Share. I've been here for almost 9 years, and this is the release that I am most excited about to share with the world. And it's a blend of rye whiskey, 4 to 9-year-old, finished in Marquez de Casanoble Añejo barrels. And there's also a portion that's finished in Amburana barrels. The Amburana is a Brazilian wood. It gives you this really interesting, like cinnamon stick, spice type note. From those Marquez de Casanoble barrels, we get these really beautiful cooked agave notes. It really enhances the depth and the richness and the journey as you experience the whiskey when you taste it. The Amburana barrels bring in just a little bit of cinnamon stick and really enhance that complexity. And so altogether, it's just this beautiful marriage of the whiskey, the tequila, and the Amburana wood that is really special and unique. So with the rye whiskey, we were trying to derive a little bit more of that botanical character, which actually pairs really nicely with the tequila character from those barrels. A little bit of that spice comes through well on both the tequila and the rye spice, of course, the rye whiskey. So they pair well together, and I love rye.
So añejo, what does that mean?
The añejo is aged for over a year.
Oh, okay.
And then they have, the Marquez is actually a blend of añejo and extra añejo.
Okay.
And so the older tequila barrels there, they have, you know, just a little bit more maturation character on them. But really beautiful, like lemongrass and cooked agave coming through.
Yeah.
That is really good.
Isn't it?
Yeah. It's
So
almost like,
interesting.
it's spicy. Like, it's not like, it's almost like the cinnamon and some of those, like, the rye, like, mixed together to, like, make it seem like it's going to be spicy, like, actually, like, hot spicy, but it's not.
Yeah.
You know? It's
I totally
perceived,
feel it.
like,
Yeah.
hotness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good.
I love the complexity on this. It's this journey from, for me, it starts off with the rye spice up front, which is not typical for me. I usually experience the rye spice last. Moving into that cooked agave on the mid palate, which gives you some weight, a little bit of agave honey as well. Moving into some cinnamon stick mids through finish,
Yeah.
I think is a really just beautiful journey through this whiskey.
Yeah, totally. I love that.
That's a hit. At the end of the tour with our new friends from Casa Noble, we tasted through a few High West expressions, and then they got to try the Noble Share for the very first time.
Salud. Thank you for the great tour.
It's wonderful to meet y'all again or to see you again, depending on the case.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. That is so smooth and so different. So light years different than everything else here.
As I'm sure we all have, I have drank a lot of different types of whiskey in my life. This is easily one of the most unique things I've ever tried.
Like even the mouthfeel is really smooth and light. Yeah.
But it's also still like luscious, right? Like it still fills your mouth and coats your mouth, but it like is also clean and delicate at the same time. Like it has these characters in both texture and flavor that I think you would almost think are mutually exclusive and yet coexist in the same glass.
It's like a nice warm hug. But that finish with the honey and lemon that's so reminiscent of agave is what really does it for me. This is outstanding. So happy with it.
We made our way back downstairs and into the barrel room to have a pour of High West High Country, an American single malt that was incredible. Isaac and Austin spoke to the room, exciting the audience for the pours we'd be enjoying with dinner. I was curious what this dinner would be. Noble Share is such a unique whiskey. I wanted to meet the chef who was tasked with this creative challenge.
I'm the youngest of four, and my oldest sister, Lisa, she got me into the restaurant business when I was in high school. I found it very amenable to the things that I liked, socializing, hanging out with girls, and playing with fire and knives, and you know, what's not fun about that? And then I stepped back a little bit, but in my early 20s, I realized that is something that I really wanted to lean into. So I got a secondary education at the Culinary Institute of America. And the rest, as they say, is history. I had an opportunity to work in France and Spain, and I spent most of my career in white linen fine dining. My mom was a horrible cook. I'm a first-generation Irish. My dad, however, was an outstanding cook, and he was a Jameson whiskey guy, like dyed-in-the-wool Jameson whiskey guy. There was always a very visible aspect of brown spirits and dinner time. So to me, like that's just something natural. If I'm having a meal, I have no problem having a really good pour of bourbon. You can have an elevated experience and have whiskey and bourbon and rye throughout the entire course of your meal, and it can supplant wine or a cider or a beer or something like that, and really kind of opening people's eyes to the connection between food and whiskey. It's because it's there. It's a real thing. We don't force it. Hopefully people will walk away having a better understanding of that food and whiskey works, right? So when you're going out to eat, like maybe you're not leaning into a wine, maybe you're looking at the bourbon side of the menu and getting your whiskey somm to come out, or an ambassador or someone who can speak to maybe a pairing with food. We do that here very, very well. A lot of restaurants, particularly in the South, Louisville, Tennessee, they also do that well. But I would like to see that become more of kind of like the run of the mill. I'd love to see people come out and walk me through their whiskey list.
We will continue to develop really interesting blends of a variety of whiskeys, whether it's different mash bills, different ages, definitely bold whiskeys. We're always looking for interesting finishing barrels, and you see a lot of that exploration in our Barrel Select program, where we have all kinds of different finishes from barrels that we source from all over the world, essentially, or different types of wood. So I think we're still in this very experimental phase, and there's still a lot we have to learn, but I think that we will continue to put out unique products.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
you. Cheers. My pleasure.
Great work.
Yeah, good job.
Good job. Yeah. You nailed it 3 times?
I hope so. Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I sit here and reflect on the last day of our trip, I take a moment to look around. I look out the window of the Airbnb. I look at our makeshift workstations at the dining table. I look at our shoes by the door. And I feel grateful for this experience. Grateful for the wonderful people at High West, my friend Andrew for coming along and diving in, for the humbling landscapes, and another day to tell one more story of my life. One more story in Whiskeyland. You see, that's what whiskey can be. It's very rarely ever about the juice, but the people that it brings together and the experiences they share. And to that, I say, to drink is to live.
Cheers.
Cheers. And then you guys can just pull these over too.
Yeah, these globules are so mesmerizing.
Really come back like
Totally are.
that's hilarious.